In a game franchise that has a roster spanning 3 decades at this point, you'd think that a familiar face seems unnecessary when there's so many to choose from. But time and time again, they're typically welcomed additions. In this video for the Borealis Company, we're going to take a look at Mortal Kombat and how it uses the stories it's told and stories that others have told to make dynamic and well thought out guest characters.
In Crom's name, I will punish you.
I'm gonna crom my knife up your ass.
If you're unfamiliar with how far this spans, I'm only going to be looking at the 4 most recent games because those are the only games in the series that have guest characters. Mortal Kombat, aka MK9, Mortal Kombat X, Mortal Kombat 11, and Mortal Kombat 1. To better analyze this, I'm taking a look at this from 3 angles to discuss these guests, starting with how accurately the developers, NetherRealm Studios, depicts the guests. I'm not saying that other games don't do this, but Mortal Kombat has an especially acquired love for making sure that they treat their guests with respect. I mean, if you know the history of the game, Mortal Kombat was originally a fighting game that would star Jean-Claude Van Damme, inspired by his films like Universal Soldier and especially Bloodsport. I would say that and the film Big Trouble in Little China are the reasons why Mortal Kombat exists. But one thing led to another, and they weren't able to get Van Damme, likeness or otherwise. But you can still see the research they put into that original game embedding itself into the DNA of the game and lore we know now. That's actually where Johnny Cage comes from. If I had to put money on it, it's originally a Jean-Claude asset that they redesigned into an original character. In fact, his initials are the same as Jean-Claude's first 2, and they finally got to make it full circle by adding a skin in MK1 that turned Johnny Cage into Bloodsport Van Damme, including voice work from the Muscles from Brussels himself.
Sign with me and you'll be swimming in box office gold.
Gold, you have my attention.
I bring this up because that origin story I think informed how NetherRealm would approach their guest characters over time. It's hard to pick just one example for this point because every character is so meticulously thought out. Conan the Barbarian's fatality in MK1 isn't just a beheading, it's the exact same V-shaped cuts that he did to Thulsa Doom in the first movie. Hell, his parry is based on him punching a camel. Leatherface has a brutality where he beats his opponent to death with a mallet, just like the first time he ever appears on film. Kratos has quick-time events in his moveset, just like in the Greek mythology games. I believe, as a consumer and a fan of these kinds of media, this does 2 things. 1, it acts as an inside joke, or a wink and a nod for people who did grow up with those stories, and 2, it inspires the people who play the game to check out the original work, either for the first time or revisiting it. Which is probably why a lot of guest characters in MK1, for example, were in shows or films that had come out within the past 5 or 6 years. I'm sure a higher up or 2 strategically recognized that this was a good marketing opportunity. That being said, not every character was chosen for this reason, thankfully. Some of them were there because they were fan favorites. Look no further than Predator in MKX and Spawn in MK11, which I agree were perfect choices, and Predator I think is the #1 guest character in MK's history, frankly because in my opinion MKX was more fun to play long term than MK11. And I loved playing Spawn, he was probably my most played character in that game aside from Raiden, but for me he kinda got boring quickly, just like the rest of the roster. But that didn't stop him from having my favorite fatality of all time. Now, if they added the aerial combos and combo extension mechanics that MK1 had to these guests, oh buddy, I'd have a hell of a time with those 2. But what about the characters that are a fun idea but just need a little more to them? That's where I want to talk about the second point, making the guests more compatible for Mortal Kombat, but still staying true to the original source material. And for that, I want to take a look at 2 characters that probably had the most change. Alien in MKX, and Ghostface in MK1. Alien I'm not sure necessarily needed that because it's already so dynamic as a monster, but Ghostface especially did. The moves are slash, stab, and apparently frying pan. But then I watched the reveal trailer and I saw this move. Okay, spinning kick with an explosive, that's probably a visual effect they added. Okay. And then this. Now, I've only seen the first 2 Scream movies, both fantastic may I add, but this felt like a stretch. By the way, I'm about to spoil the shit out of the first 2 movies, at least, but the first movie especially, so if you haven't seen it, please stop watching this video. If my retention rate plummets at this point, I completely understand. And then, during what's called a combat cast, where they showcase upcoming characters, QA analyst Stephanie Brownback explained that they took Ghostface's unique strategy of having multiple killers be Ghostface and applied it to smaller known characters of Kano's faction, the Black Dragon. Those characters are widely considered to be Cobra and Kira. And if you just watch that footage, you know those are pretty good guesses. But it makes Ghostface so much more of a dynamic character than just a psychopathic high schooler. It gives the player more to do, makes it less predictable, so you're not guaranteed a loss, and still stays true to all 3 characters. Now, with Alien, they explain it in the reveal trailer, but this xenomorph chest-bursted from Baraka. So, it has both original moves, like being able to launch a facehugger at the opponent, flick acid blood, have another xenomorph drop from the roof as if it's fresh out of Aliens, and have the forearm blades and strikes that the fan favorite character always had. Granted, I think this choice was made because Baraka never made it to the MKX roster, so this is probably NetherRealm rectifying that, especially because this is the only time in the last 4 games that Baraka didn't make the cut. Finally, let's take a look at what's probably my favorite phrase at this point if you've seen my other videos, thematic coherence. How do the guest characters fit within the guest roster and the roster as a whole? I'm not going to include MK9 in this because the only characters they had were Kratos from God of War, if you were a PlayStation player, and Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it goes without saying, but MKX takes the cake on this one, as the theme is horror movie icons in a game that feels like the grossest and grittiest of the 4 that I've been talking about, which is saying a lot. If you don't believe me, I cautiously invite you to check out Ermac's fatalities from this game. The characters made sense, they held their own within reason, and fans could get a dream fight of Alien vs. Predator in one game, and a game that was fun to play. MK11 is kind of where it felt like NetherRealm was adding the movie characters they grew up with, but they didn't have enough to make it one cohesive guest roster. They added RoboCop, The Terminator, John Rambo, Spawn, and the Joker. The first 3 make sense within their own, action movie heroes of the 80s and 90s, and then Spawn and the Joker, I guess, are a pair of comic book characters that are violent enough to make sense for a Mortal Kombat game. Spawn had been requested for over a decade at this point, but I know a lot of fans, myself included, were honestly kind of let down that they used that slot in the roster for the Joker, especially when I could just play him in the Injustice games, which were also developed by NetherRealm. So they had the same feel, even if they had different mechanics. Then, with MK1, they kind of found their footing by evenly splitting the guest roster down the middle with the same theme from MK11. Violent comic book characters in the form of Omni-Man from Invincible, Peacemaker from the Suicide Squad, and Homelander from The Boys, and action or horror movie characters that inspired them, with, as I mentioned before, Ghostface, Conan, and T-1000 from Terminator 2. Which feels like they had some more fun interacting with each other than the previous roster.
Why are you staring at me?
Because, fuck, man! You look just like my dad!
But keep in mind too, there's a lot of behind the scenes that we will never see. Even though they had a lot of the original actors return to play the characters, for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger never came back to do the voice of Terminator or Conan, and Anthony Starr couldn't play Homelander in both Mortal Kombat and Call of Duty at the same time. I mention this because I think we have to acknowledge the difference between the stories our expectations tell and the stories reality tells. The Joker might not have been NetherRealm's first choice either, but maybe that's what they were able to get. So we at least got something. MKX maybe shouldn't have worked the way it did, but they caught lightning in a bottle. But given all those licensing deals and conversations that have to come together to make one of these characters happen, the results we have at the end of the day still make up for great stories that players can rely on and look forward to making for themselves. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and let me know in the comments if you've played any of these games before. Which one's your favorite? Is there a specific one you want me to focus on? Is there a specific Mortal Kombat character you want me to focus on? And if it's up yet, I promise it's coming if it's not. Be sure to check out my original content sister channel, Borealis Stories.
You are the most boring player I've ever seen in this game.